The future of work. We team up. We are open. We make conscious choices. We focus. We contribute. We refresh.
We are Microsoft, the Netherlands, and these are our rituals anywhere, anytime. This is Microsoft Security Lifehack Podcast.
Hi, and good afternoon or good day or whatever it is. Welcome to a new podcast here from the Microsoft Podcast Studios. My name is Jeroen Jansen, Product Marketing Manager at Microsoft. And today I'm here joined with my good friends Ronny and Shruti. They're going to introduce themselves. But good to have you here and hope you enjoy this session. We're going to talk about Lapsus. But before that, let's introduce the speakers for today. Let me start with the lady across the room for me, across the table. So who are you and what's your role?
Hey Jeroen, you already know me,
yeah,
but
for the audience,
for our viewers,
yeah.
Yes, indeed. So this is Shruti Alani. I'm a technical security specialist within Microsoft, which basically means I am customer facing. I deal a lot with the customers who are interested in our security products, who are also currently using our security products, but are have questions around the prevalent issues in the whole cloud security and cybersecurity landscape. So that's me in a nutshell. I'm passing it over to my colleague.
Thank you, Shruti. And thank you for having us, Jeroen. I'm Ronny de Jong, security technical specialist also within Microsoft. I'm actually on the same team as Shruti. And as Shruti mentioned in the introduction, we are customer facing and helping our customers, enabling them and get out the most of our security solutions, making sure that their security posture is in a good shape and keep them resilient to all the bad stuff it's going outside.
Okay, cool. Good to hear. And today, what are we going to talk about today? I see something called Lapsus with a dollar sign at the end.
Yeah,
so
the famous dollar sign.
The famous dollar sign. So what is it all about? And we also prepared some slides for that. So let me just bring up the slide deck here. So yeah, what's it all about? Can one of you two elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think Shruti can take the introduction on what is Lapsus.
Sure, absolutely. So last time when the three of us, Jeroen, Ronny and I, we convened together, we talked about Log4j, which was a vulnerability that almost shook the world. This time we are talking to you about Lapsus dollar event, which was also something that shook the whole cyber world. So what is Lapsus? We are going to discuss that. We are also going to discuss what happened when, what was the timeline. We are also going to talk about how to detonate the attempts made by Lapsus hacker group against your cybersecurity posture. So we'll talk about how to improve your cyber resilience, and eventually we will summarize all of that in key takeaways and take any questions.
Cool. So Cool. That's good to hear. So a little bit more Lapsus. I heard about it. Yeah, I know what it's like a hacker group. What was the impact? Can you tell me a bit about what it was about?
Absolutely. So to start with, Lapsus is a group of hackers who are quite vocal in their attacks. They don't hide behind the computer screens. They don't really cover their traces. They've even come out on Zoom calls of different companies that they've attacked, and they have taunted their clients and their customers. I should not say customers, their victims. So Lapsus dollar is actually being looked at as a hacker group, but there are also speculations going around about the fact that Lapsus, the main mind behind Lapsus dollar group is actually a 17-year-old boy.
I heard something about
who lives in
the UK.
In the UK with his mother, but it's all speculations. There is no certain word around it.
Is it the same group that reaches out to people within big companies and then say, okay, if you wanna give me your password and your multi-factor authentication, we give you some money or something like that? Is that also what they do?
They do act a lot around identity. So they compromise the identities, they do lateral movements, they do credential access, those kind of attacks. Yeah. But eventually those attacks in some cases have only led to reputation damage. In some cases they have also in the past gone ahead and asked for ransom. But their ransom related activities are quite low compared to their reputational damage.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I saw sometimes that it was some screenshots that they were asking if you work for Microsoft or work for Apple or and you want to not so be nice to your boss, then give us your email address, password, and stuff like that. Oh man, amazing. What did they do? What's their attack sequence about?
Indeed. So basically, this time around, they launched some attacks in January. Wherein they targeted some big names like Nokia, Okta being the biggest one, Ubisoft, Samsung, even Microsoft, T-Mobile, and Nvidia Corporation in their recent attempts. And when I say recent, you can see the timeline on your screen. Basically, what happened was, and I say Okta is the biggest one because that sequence lasts very long. But indeed, other big names were also involved. At Okta, there was a third-party vendor called Sitel, whose part of the network called Sykes Network was breached by Lapsus $. So why I quoted this was that it's not just the big names, it's also their vendors who are equally a part in the whole chain and who can equally be victimized. The impact, Jeroen, as you asked me, was that about 366 out of 15,000 customers of Okta, which basically form their 2.5% of their customer base. They were affected. We do not know the extent. The objective of this event is also not to understand the impact on Okta, but the objective is to understand the mindset of an attacker and to also help prevent and detect across your organization about such hackers and their attempts. So the idea behind this is that Okta has also gone on record and said that they were a bit late in finding out about this attack. Why were they late? How can we help? How can you as an organization actually detect things early and take an action early? That's the intent of today's session.
Okay, cool.
Right. So let's also go through the timeline very, very quickly. Sorry, Jeroen. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So basically, sometime in late January, we noticed that a threat actor was able to access the third-party support engineer's laptop. This support engineer was belonging from Sitel. Around a few days later, there was some activity done by the hacker group or the Lapsus $. Group that triggered an MFA or multi-factor authentication. Now, that multi-factor authentication was not accepted by that support engineer, which is what led to a series of events that Lapsus $. Exploited a lot. You will see that this slide is mainly focused on Okta, but keep in mind that it's not just Okta. There were a lot of other names involved, mentioned towards the end of the slide. In one of their recent victim claims, as I may call it, Lapsus has also come out and talked about Globant consulting firm. So when I say recent, I mean in late March, they targeted some of the companies and they said that we are back from the vacation. These were the exact words used in their credential access attempts.
Yeah.
So as Microsoft, what is our take on it? So we did confirm in some blog posts that there were attempts. There were large-scale social engineering and extortion campaigns against multiple customers. What we've done is we are tracking the Lapsus $. Group's activities and campaigns under a name called or a code called dev0537. And we have successfully recruited insiders at victimized, or as I may call it, potentially victimized companies in order to assist in their hacks.
Okay. So we system. So what do we see? Is there a possibility to defend against that? Because what's then the triggers that we see? Maybe we can dive a little bit into that.
Absolutely. So that's exactly where I pass it on to Ronny, my colleague, who will answer Jeroen's question and also let us know more about Dev0537.
Yeah. As you mentioned, how can we defend ourselves to these kind of bad actors? What we are showing here is the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. And part of this solution, this is a security solution where all signals of our defender stack comes all together to have the full picture of a kill chain. And as part of that identifying kill chain, we have also the threat analytics part. And the threat analytics part gives you as an organization insights whether a certain threat or malware is applicable to your organization. And in this case, we are talking about Lapsus, which is more about compromising accounts and data extortions, and not in particular to vulnerabilities. So that's a different approach and different angle. But as you can see here, we identified the Lapsus group as dev 0537. And if you dive and click on it, you will find more in detailed information of the whole process, what the initiative is behind, more information about the hacker group, the activities, and also what you can do as an organization, which measurements or mitigations you can take. And that's also what we are informing our customers. And if you drill down, you will see also the exposure and the mitigation measurements you can take. So in this case, for Lapsus, what configurations or misconfigurations can be identified, and based on that, we can also identify the configuration changes needed to safeguard yourself from these kind of attacks. And in this case with Lapsus, it's more related to our identities and making sure that our identities are secured. So as you can see here, you will see some exposure devices. And these all things what you see here are related to, for example, attack surface reduction, making sure that you're not vulnerable to phishing campaigns or retrieving your account information from your end users. And that's one side of the story. So another part of it is identifying those threats, and the other side is that we are also able to detect the patterns, the behavior. As Shruti mentioned, there was a support engineer involved, but he was successfully ignoring the multi-factor authentication attempts. And that's because they configured multi-factor authentication in their organization, which will come back later on during this session. But as you can see here as an example, you'll see here suspicious activities to get and compromise your account information. So as you can see here with the categories, and we driving into those categories, you'll see here we are talking about initial access, execution, but also credential access. And that's one of the patterns we can recognize. This is something about Lapsus and retrieving your account information. Because once they retrieve their account information, they are able to successfully infiltrate in your organization and take it from there. But these activities are not coming from themselves. So it's not a single activity. They form a chain of activities.
Yeah.
And that's actually what you're showing here, what you're seeing here. And that's also the strength of, for example, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. It's not giving you a single event, but gives you the full picture. Yeah. So you have a better understanding what's going on in your organization and how to mitigate or address that issue.
So if I understand correctly, you say multiple times already that the multi-factor authentication wasn't used. But that's your defense layer, right? So the support engineer got the message of authenticating and he ignored it or declined it, or
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So they successfully implemented multi-factor authentication, which introduces strong authentication.
Yeah.
But the support engineer didn't accept the authentication prompt.
Okay.
So that's where we also in the conclusion we have a lot of precautions or measurements we can take to make sure that you are not compromised to these kind of initiatives, but your users are also an important part in the defense strategy.
Yeah.
So it's not only the technology, but also the user awareness to make sure that if they are using multi-factor authentication, that they are use it wisely and not randomly accepting these kind of prompts.
Okay, clear. Yeah, absolutely.
And if we go back to the Defender portal, here you can see an example of a multi-stage attack. You will see the attack is rolling over to multiple attack tactics, for example, which is identified by the MITRE attack framework. So we are also able to detect those types and making sure what kind of actors are trying to misuse your organization or attack your organization. So that helps you also in solving these kind of issues or potential issues.
So cool how we can investigate and how we're able to track these kinds of things. And I think that's the power that we have within Microsoft, that we are such a large organization and security is really top of mind, that we have so many people. We invest a lot of money on security. I think for the coming 5 years we pledged for $20 billion on security effort. I think that's good to be aware of, that this is our bread and butter. We think it's important to keep our customers safe and make sure that we act very fast, because we acted very fast, right? Also on this.
Indeed.
Certainly. Yeah, that's why we're also trying to share our threat intelligence in our products, not only into Defender for Endpoint or the security portal, but also in the other solutions like Sentinel, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so good to see that the things that we're doing is that we try to build this in and make sure that we are able to defend our customers. So next, what's next? The improve your cyber resilience I see on the slide. So what does that mean?
Yeah, as mentioned, we introduced the Defender portal as a starting point to identify the threats. But in the case of Lapsus, it's all about the identity and securing our identities. And what you see here is an overview of a few solutions which we briefly want to touch and highlight on what you can implement in your organization to secure and keep your identities secure. So I think, Shruti, can you take, for example, the conditional access one?
Sure, absolutely. So now we'll be talking about Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 2 capabilities. The intention of this session is not to go into Plan 1 and Plan 2 and also not to spend hours talking about licensing. But this is we are planning to make this a core technical session so that we all understand the capabilities that help prevent and detect against such attacks or attempts. So we have 5 capabilities, out of which the first one is conditional access. Now, keep in mind that conditional access is a set of conditions which are checked and a set of controls that are implemented as an outcome of checking of those conditions. Now, those conditions could be different conditions as you see on screen. For example, there is a change in user roles. There is an involvement of a third-party organization or a partner organization who have access to the same systems or same workloads. There could be different types of devices that are being used. Are those devices compliant or not compliant as per your organization's policy? The physical and virtual location of a user. So what is the IP address that the user is logging in from? What is the geographical location that the user is trying to access a particular workload or a particular system from? Is the user using VPN or not? Are the application and authentication methods approved or not? Is the application that, let's say cloud application, for example, that the customer is trying to use, is it approved in your organization or not? Those are the different kinds of conditions that are processed and checked. Now, when I say processed, they are actually evaluated against your own organization's policy and Microsoft's or Azure Active Directory's own machine learning models and engines. They are evaluated real time, which means even if there is, let's say, access provided as a result of checking a particular condition, and that condition changes in the next few minutes or next few seconds, then that is also taken into account before taking the control. And that's why we say that it's a real-time evaluation engine. Now, what could happen as a result of checking those conditions? Either a user's access could be blocked or allowed. So, for example, if you know that the user is based out of the Netherlands, but he seems to be accessing the cloud app from Japan, for example, and there is an impossible travel activity because it's the same user logging in from Europe as well as from Japan, then there could be a verdict wherein the access is blocked. Or if you trust that the user could be traveling, the user could be logging in from the US because he is on a particular assignment, there is no other geographical location involved, then you may want to limit access or require a multi-factor authentication, or you may need a password reset before the user reaches that workload or the resource. Blocking legacy authentication, requiring further approvals, all of those are the outcomes or the controls of verification of those conditions. Now, you see some extra information on the left and right on this page. So that's just to say that it goes above and beyond the on-premises and web apps. It also extends to cloud SaaS applications. It also goes up to Microsoft Cloud. It is not just limited to Windows. It also extends to Android, iOS, macOS, other configuration management solutions like Jamf, which is used highly for macOS, and so on. So basically, the reach and the scope is endless.
Yeah, so if I understand it correctly, especially around the conditional access, and let's take the applications, that it's not only for the Microsoft applications, but also third-party applications that are SaaS applications. They can also use this mechanism that we have with conditional access to make sure that we keep them as safe as possible. And not only is it a Microsoft party, but it's a party for all cloud products.
Exactly. Via Azure Active Directory, you may see it working for only Microsoft applications, but there are ways and means and mechanisms to extend the same thing for other cloud apps also, like third-party non-Microsoft cloud apps also.
Yeah, so I encourage everybody who's developing applications, look at this. You can integrate it with your current systems. The Azure AD authentication, you can integrate that and make sure that you have this in place. So it's always good to look at that. So we have the conditional access space. Anything you'd like to add, or something about identity? I think is also very important into this case, right?
Indeed. So let's go to identity protection, and I pass it on to Ronny.
Thank you, Shruti. Conditional access is actually the context where policy mechanism to allow or block you from accessing your data. But another side of the house of what we can protect is identity protection. And with identity protection, we can also use the same real-time detection engine to make sure that we provide the same real-time protection. And identity protection is actually easily configured by identifying risky sign-ins and risky users. And by configuring these policies, you can give or define a kind of risky sign-in, for example. So the scenario Shruti mentioned, like an impossible travel or a not likely login attempt, might be enforced a policy which requires you to a step-up authentication. So in that case, it's not blocking you, but it's actually requesting you an extra multi-factor authentication. Make sure that you are logging in and the login attempt is appropriated. But you might be also having a risky user policy, and that means when you're somewhere logging in into a network which might be identified as a bot network or something else, then it will raise a flag and say, okay, but this network we won't trust. And then we can also, as you can see, based on the policy you defined, perform an automated remediation. So in that case, you won't be prompted for a step-up authentication, but you will be blocked, for example, or you will be asked to change your password. So you can change your password by using the self-service password reset capabilities. So it's continuously making sure that our identities are secured, our users are secured, but also keeping an eye on the productivity side, not blocking our end users from not being able to log in. So that's a fine balance and balancing act where based on the signals, on the real-time detection, whether or not we should block a user login, or we should give the user an extra prompt, or he or she should change proactively his or her password.
So what I think is really cool about this is that what you say about automatic remediation is that it's not being like all this work that an IT staff have to do, right? So we're able to automate these processes, what are like really important processes, right? So if we don't do this, hackers will have a free chance of getting in. But especially doing this on an automatic way, I think that's really cool to see.
Yeah, and an extra advantage is that based on the password hashes, so not the passwords themselves, but the hashes, and that's why it's also important to make sure when you're configuring your identities, especially the hybrid identities, so your on-premise identities are synchronized to the cloud, so that's the definition of hybrid identity, that you do that alongside with the password hashing, because based on the password hash, we can also identify if these accounts are compromised on the dark web. And we have our intel, and we are using our intel and use it in identity protection. And if we are sure that a subset of accounts are compromised or leaked on the dark web, we also automatically block or making sure that the end user is changing his or her password. So it's all about real time. It's all about automated and connecting the dots to each other.
It's so cool to see that we are able to do these kinds of stuff.
Yeah, definitely, and it's just we have covered just 2 items. We have a few other things which we can cover, and one of these great things, Shruti, I'm sure she will about continuous access evaluation.
Sure. Thank you, Ronny. So, continuous access evaluation is yet another feature of Azure Active Directory. In this screen, you see 3 key things: identity provider, which could be your Azure Active Directory. There is a resource provider, which could be any application, say for example Outlook, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, etc. And then there is a CAE capable client who is basically trying to access the resource provider or is trying to access that particular application. Now, the first step here, what happens is that within the identity provider, which is your Azure Active Directory, you implement certain policies. Those policies are enforced onto your resource provider, which could be any application on cloud. Now, once that happens, your client or the CAE capable client, as mentioned on this page, he or she contacts Azure Active Directory to basically require or request the tokens. The Azure Active Directory provides the access tokens. Then the client uses those access tokens to basically go to the resource provider and access the resource. Now, if the policy is satisfied, the access is granted. If the policy is not satisfied, the token is rejected in real time. In case there are events which are happening on the resource provider, or even on the client side, or in the policy there are changes, then those are considered as events, which is step 4 on the screen. And due to those events, certain tokens can be rejected, which is step 5. So this is a typical flow of continuous access evaluation.
It's really nice to see how the token refreshment works, right? So that you see what automatically happens with rejection. If one fails, then it stops immediately. So there's no process of going further. First, this has to be resolved, and then you can go to the next step.
Indeed. And I also get a lot of questions from my customers about the types of events involved here. So the 3 key types of events that you should that you can blindly trust will be checked here are user termination, for example, or any password reset. The user session will be revoked in real time. The second type would be the network location changed. The conditional access policies will kick in immediately and the token will be denied. And thirdly, the token export to a machine outside of a trusted network. So that will also be blocked by conditional access policies. Of course, the other benefits depend on the way you've configured it, the type of policies that you've written, but those 3 are the key benefits.
Okay, check.
Going ahead to entitlement management.
Entitlement management, I don't know what it is. I've never heard of that. I think Ronny knows, right?
Exactly.
Certainly, yeah. Entitlement management, good to know that it's part of the identity governance within Azure AD. And identity governance entails a few components, as you can see here. And entitlement management is one of them. And as part of the joiner, mover, leaver process, users are getting provisioned, users are onboarded, users might have a role or a profile within an organization, and a user might also be roaming from a role throughout the organization, and then some rights or permissions might go along with the user in particular. And to keep track on it and to make sure that you have the right permissions for your job, you want to govern that. And one of these things is doing that by, for example, an entitlement management or an access package. And an access package is actually a boundary where you can link, for example, a SharePoint site or a team site. Or a membership of a security group, and that security group might be related to, for example, inside a deployment ring for Windows 11 or a preview build, for example. And you are, as an end user, able to request access to that particular access package. And depending on what's associated, which resources are associated to a certain access package, it will be automatically approved, or there will be an approval process. And its approval can be approved by a manager, or it can be approval process with multiple approvers. And based on that, the access is reviewed and it's granted. But after a certain time, it can be defined in 30 days, 60 days, it should be re-evaluated. So based on that re-evaluation, based on your current role, for example, or your role might be changed, as you can see here, then you will lose access to that particular resource, for example. And this is one great example of governing your access based on your role and which permissions your role entails.
So the fun fact I think about this is that if I look at it, and I haven't seen this before, so I really love the fact, is that it really depends on the roles you have, and that you have like a review moment within your career, for that matter, in an organization, that it's still applicable that you need these kinds of rights, yes or no. Is this available for everybody, or is this an add-on to a SKU or whatsoever?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jeroen.
Thank you. I had a good question. Yay!
No, it's what Shruti also mentioned in the introduction of the capabilities of Azure AD. What you see here is part of the identity governance. And the identity governance, that's indeed part of an Azure AD P2 license. So that's the SKU. You have an Azure AD Premium 1 and a Premium 2 license. Yep. And this whole identity governance, including the privileged identity management we briefly touch, is also part of that P2 license SKU.
Yeah. And a lot of customers already have it within their suite that they have around Microsoft 365. They have it already in place. So it's good to check that. If you want to know you have this, you can check. You can also buy this an extra add-on. And it's good to check these kinds of things, because what we see also with customers, that's really funny to see, is that they have so much already that they have bought from us as Microsoft around security, but haven't deployed this. And one of the key things that we're going to look in the near future also within Microsoft is helping our customers getting the value out of the things they've bought already, because sometimes they don't have a clue, or they have a clue, but not all of the clues for what's already available to them and what they can do to be more secure in an easy and manageable way.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think I'm counted to 4. I think we're now at number 5. And if I'm correctly, and my algorithm is still right, Shruti is going to be the person who's presenting on least privileged access.
Perfect. You got the drift here, Rune.
Yes.
Indeed. So also to add on to what Jeroen and Ronny said, at times a lot of customers, they don't have a clue about how it functions or what they have bought, how to deploy it, how to use it. But we discussed conditional access being triggered by Azure Active Directory. Before that, Ronny showed you how M365 Defender platform works. We've not covered in this session Defender for Cloud Apps, which governs the cloud apps. Imagine combining these three, wherein Defender for Cloud Apps gives you the insights and governance capabilities on cloud apps, which you can use within Azure Active Directory to block or unblock access, and eventually get alerted upon by Defender for Identity. So that's how the three technologies could work in tandem. This is just one very, very high level example. Coming back to privilege identity management, within any organization, it is not always necessary that there is only one global admin or one global security admin. Time to time, an organization might need to elevate privileges of a user to sort of wear the hat of a global admin, or wear the hat of a password admin, or wear the hat of a database admin, and so on. With that comes the need to give access to those different users to different resources for different periods of time. Now, what you can do within Azure Active Directory is manage this privileged identity, the identity privileges of any particular admin. So if we go on to the next screen, that makes it even more clear that you have multiple admins in your organization, but not every admin is at the same level. So for instance, a security admin would need less access than a global admin, but maybe for a higher number of hours, depending on the type of work that he or she is planning to do, or maybe on lesser resources, but for a longer time. Likewise, password admin could need access for less number of hours, but maybe on more workloads or more resources. So that's the beauty of it. That's what you can design or approve or define with this particular feature of Azure Active Directory, which works on three principles: zero standing access, just-in-time access, and just enough access.
Okay, so I know just in time, that's the timing that you need. The just enough access is about the rights, I think, but zero standing access?
Zero standing access, as in there is no perpetual access, that you cannot make a standard user admin forever.
Okay, perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
now I understand.
Yeah.
And also, I had the discussion also with people. They go like, I asked them, why do you need like a global administrator or a security administrator needs like internet rights, being directly connected to the internet or also to a browser? There's also things to think about. Is it something that's like just enough access then? An example?
Exactly. So the scope of access is covered by just enough access indeed.
Okay, perfect. That's good to hear.
Anywhere, anytime.
This is Microsoft Security Lifehack Podcast.
So with that, we're going to go to the key takeaways, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're quite right, Jeroen.
Perfect.
We shared a lot of information on how you can improve your security posture, in particular to securing our identities. And as you can see here in this bell curve, 98% or 98%.
Yeah.
Protection is realized by applying some basic security hygiene measurements. And as we briefly touched about privileged identity management, apply least privileged access, as Shruti mentioned, but also the strong authentication introduced by conditional access, for example. So here you will see the confirmation that with applying these measurements, you're up to 98% protecting your identities and your assets in your organization. And these are not really sophisticated or complex measurements to be taken. So this is definitely something to consider and apply within your own organization.
So if I look at it, it reminds me something like there's a lot of this is already in our zero trust methods that we're using, right? So as I see, apply least privileged access, multi-authentication, and protect data. These are things that's already within that.
They're all founded on the
Yeah.
zero trust concept, indeed, of least privileged access or least access, but also assume you're breached. And that's not only applicable to our identities, but also to our devices, for example.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they are fundamental to your zero trust practice.
Okay, cool. So let's say I want to implement this. What kind of steps do I need to take? Is there like a roadmap or something that's is good to have a look at?
Yeah, we prepared a kind of a high-level roadmap to give some guidance which we can follow to implement these measurements. And it all starts with the fundamentals. So fix the basics. Make sure that you have hybrid identity in place if you have an on-premise footprint. If you're all in cloud, then there's no hybrid identity, then you're full cloud. Utilizing single sign-on, that's not only secure but also user-friendly and convenient. Just signing in without providing your password. Take benefit of modern authentication. That's also alongside the practice of conditional access. We will cover next topic. The password hashing, which I already mentioned, it's used primarily also for identity protection. And if we are having the basics in place, then we can extend it to the next step, which mostly are part of an E3 deployment. Talking about conditional access, and we have conditional access also in the context-aware approach, which is dynamically based on signals, like information, identity protection works. Multi-factor authentication using the self-service password reset. That's also why I mentioned in combination with identity protection, if an end user is requested to change his or her password, then self-service password comes around. Making sure that your endpoints are managed, and if we have that in place, then we can extend it, and then we are coming with the Azure AD P2 functionality, like identity protection, which we briefly touched, alongside with password protection. And with password protection, if we are using and still using passwords, then we are just making sure that with password protection we are using a strong passwords, so that simple passwords can't be used or not are banned, for example. So if we are using passwords, do it in the right way. And that actually forms the fundamental of protecting our identities, and we can enhance that with, for example, Defender for Identity. And we mainly covered protecting our identities in the cloud, but as mentioned, organizations with an on-premise footprint still relying on Active Directory or ADFS. And although we are encouraging you to modernize your infrastructure, if you have so, then we need to respect that. And then Defender for Identity is able to also give you the protection for your on-premise accounts. And that wraps up the full chain, not only on-premise, but also in cloud.
Okay, I understand. Really love this slide, how it's built up around here. This for zero trust, is from online security. Absolutely good.
Yeah, it gives you a kind of an example how you can proceed. It's also based in a logical order, and also depending on your maturity level. Some capabilities you might already have implemented, but gives you some guidance on where to start, or if you already have some solutions in place, then go from there.
Okay, perfect. So next up, I think Shruti, you have something to add to this?
A great roadmap, I would say. That's the only thing I would add on that slide. I think Ronny covered it quite well. A few next steps. Firstly, of course, maintain strong authentication, not just authentication, but also authorization protocols. Protect your identity. Not just protect your users, but also protect your devices, which means make sure that your devices are compliant. Ensure that once your users and devices are compliant, then you're getting enough data and enough telemetry from not just these two sources, but from other sources that I will talk about shortly. And make sure that it's not just process and technology, it's also people. So it's people, process, and technology who are a complete part of this cyber defense.
Okay.
In short, if I have to summarize, I would say follow zero trust principles. At Microsoft, we have established 3 principles: verify explicitly, use least privilege access, and assume breach, which basically means trust it less to trust it more.
Yeah, trust no one or trust nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Only then can you build a resilient system, not just across identities and endpoints, but also across data, apps, infra, network, and your entire architecture. As they say, security should not be bolted on, it should be built in. And that's what Microsoft solutions are all about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we try to drive this across all of our applications. So if you're on an Azure space, if you're on Office 365, business applications or whatsoever, security is top of mind. Even within our Surface devices, we do it on a hardware base that we call chip and cloud environment. So we always try to make sure that we have this all in place. So last but not least, some resources I think that we can share, right?
Indeed, of course. So the first one is Microsoft's annual Digital Defense Report that came out sometime in November 2021. And then there is Dutch Cybersecurity Center page, which gives you an idea about the 8 basic security principles as per the Dutch government.
Yeah, and that's good that you say that, because in the end of June, we will do a deep dive on this topic, because we have a special session with Anke den Oude, our general manager at Microsoft, and Hans de Vries from the NCSC, our cybersecurity center director. And they will do a session on about the basic measurements, the basismaatregelen, as we call them in Dutch. And with that, we also do a bit of a deep dive with Kimberly Hengst from the NCSC and Jelle Niemandsverdriet, who's our National Technology Officer, or Security Officer, sorry, here within Microsoft. And also the 8 basics measurements of the basismaatregelen will be explained in 8 small podcasts that we have that you can then listen into and see what it will do for you. So good for a little shout out also on this. So thanks for mentioning that, Shruti.
Sure. Woohoo.
Ooh. Anything else? Is this it? I thought it was amazing. So thank you so much for all the things that you said. If you have any questions, please email them to us. You see our email addresses in the slide before. So take a check at that and email us for that. And with that, I would like to thank you all for joining us. It was fun having you guys here. And hope to see you guys next time.
Bedankt voor het luisteren naar deze podcast van Microsoft Nederland.